The PC Engine has so many wonderful shoot-'em-ups. Isn't it time that we give the other ones a chance? Tensei Ryuu Saint Dragon, a game polite enough to include its own translation in its title, isn't the worst PC Engine shoot-'em-up, but it might be one of the harshest to play. So before I get into anything else, I kinda need to explain the audio in this game. Let me start playing, and can you hear me? Can you hear me over that? Let me just turn it down a bit. Okay, gotta turn it down a bit more. A little bit more than that. Okay, there we go. What's happening there is that every time you shoot, the game plays a very loud burst of white noise. Without getting too deep into the technical weeds, white noise is random sound. And that doesn't mean jumbled up sound. I mean that the pressure that occurs from the accumulation of waves that makes up the sound at any given instant is random. Because all of it averages out, what you perceive when you hear white noise is something like this. Since noise like this is relatively easy to generate, and it has plenty of uses, early computers and consoles often had an entire sound channel dedicated just to it. By adjusting the amplitude and weighting that randomness a bit, you could generate useful sound effects like explosions or the sounds of percussion instruments. One property of white noise that you're probably familiar with is that its randomness tends to mask other sound, and that's what's happening in this game. The noise that's generated every time you shoot is louder than the other effects of the game. It tends to blow out everything else. Not to mention it makes a dull roar the entire time you're playing. So I had to turn the game audio levels down a lot further than I usually do for this one. Okay, with that said, where did Tensei Ryuu come from anyways? Well, it was first released in arcades in 1989. That original game was developed by NMK, the developer behind the also mediocre shoot-'em-up P-47. The arcade game doesn't seem to have gotten much attention, though it did get a lot of European microcomputer ports. I have to wonder if the game's very European-looking style might have had something to do with that. The plot of the game is that Tensei Ryuu is a space dragon, and it's fighting an army of mecha, and that's it. That's the entire story. I didn't even omit any details. The manual story section gives you one sentence, and then goes on to describe the gameplay. Tensei Ryuu has 6 stages, and they are relatively long ones. It'll take about half an hour to play through the entire game if you're doing well, and that's about how long most shoot-'em-ups at this point were. When you press either button 1 or 2, they do the same thing in this case. Your Serpentine Dragon fires 2 shots. A primary weapon that can be switched out, and a secondary weapon that's always a small blue bullet. Power-ups are found by shooting the red, are they stars, flames? Well, something, they're little red blobs. And these will release an icon that has a letter on it. Both the primary and secondary weapon have 3 levels of power, and even when you collect an icon to switch your primary weapon, it still powers up. The default primary weapon is the Flame Breath, that just shoots a larger bullet of flame straight forward. L stands for the Ring Laser, and that's a larger bullet that comes straight out of your mouth. I'm beginning to see a pattern here. But the B weapon is something different. It's Bound and Crunch, and that is both the rapid fire weapon, the spread shot, and the bouncing shot all in one. There's also a T for turret that makes your shot go in the direction that you're moving, but I did not get that because it doesn't show up in the first 3 stages of the game. As for which of those are best, I wound up settling on the B, but this is one of those shoot-'em-ups where even basic enemies take a ton of hits to destroy, so there's good arguments for using the concentrated damage of the F or L as well. Collecting the N icon powers up your secondary weapon, and as it levels up, it becomes more of a cone shot. The spread on that is super narrow though, so it's not really going to help that much with clearing out enemies around you. Other icons that can drop are an S to increase your speed, and this is one of those games where your default speed is way too slow, and a shield that will make you invincible for 5 seconds. Now you might think 5 seconds is a weirdly small amount of time for invincibility in a game where the scrolling is this slow, and you are correct. It is almost completely useless. The dragon has one more thing it can use, and that's its own body. It trails behind your movement, and the head is the only thing where you'll get destroyed if it gets hit. The body segments can absorb shots, theoretically. In practice, it's only certain bullets, and you'll never know for sure which ones are which until they shoot through and hit you. The tip of the dragon's tail does damage, but it is so insignificant that it can't destroy anything. Okay, I guess technically it's possible that it could destroy something, but I don't think I ever saw it actually do that the whole time I was playing. If you get destroyed, you lose all of your speed power-ups, one level from your primary and secondary weapon, and then are sent back to a checkpoint. I found this to be annoying, but not as devastating as in some other shoot-'em-ups. But that was mainly because even when you're at full power, you still feel pretty underpowered in this game. So you wind up going from sometimes you can destroy an enemy if you concentrate your shots, to don't even worry about it, just keep dodging them. One odd quirk of this game is that once you destroy a boss, then it just kicks you into the next level with little fanfare. There's no stage clear or shot of you progressing. The boss just finishes exploding, fade out, fade in. When it comes to the opinions of Japanese players, I found two consistent things. First, people who got confused and purchased the game because they thought it was a port of Taito's Cyvelian. You can see why people would both get confused and annoyed by that. And second, they found Tensei Ryuu Saint Dragon to be mediocre. Not bad enough to inspire real hostility, just a general sense that it wasn't worth playing. I think I personally like it less than those people, but mainly that comes down to having the sound in my ears for an hour straight. Yeah, that's really bad. I wouldn't call it the worst PC Engine shoot-'em-up, but Tensei Ryuu might be the shoot-'em-up most likely to physically repel me. There's other problems beyond what I described, like how the game tends to drop enemies right on top of you. I wound up having to memorize the enemy spawn points and then move into bad positions where I could avoid the spawn, but not hit anything. The bosses are also terminally boring. They all have simple patterns where you shoot them for a minute and a half until they explode, and there's very little creativity on display in their design. The fourth stage boss, which I didn't reach, is just a rectangle. Tensei Ryuu Saint Dragon is a game where just about everything is done poorly. On a platform overflowing with great shoot-'em-ups, it mainly stands out as one that no one would want to play.